Before we start, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you won't miss any new videos. Fact 1. The Declaration of Independence. July myth and August reality. July 4, 1776, is the day the Second Continental Congress officially approved the text of the Declaration. However, the document displayed in the National Archives in Washington, the one with all the signatures, was physically signed only on August 2nd. Why the delay? The rewriting. Initially, the Dunlap broadsides were printed, about 200 copies featuring only the names of Congress President John Hancock and Secretary Charles Thomson. These were dispatched across the colonies. Absent delegates. Many delegates left Philadelphia in late June and didn't return until August. The famous signature. John Hancock placed his massive, sweeping signature on August 2nd, famously remarking that he wanted King George to be able to read it without spectacles. Some delegates, like Thomas McKean, didn't sign until 1777, while others were replaced before they ever got the chance. Fact 2. The arrest of President Grant, a stop on Pennsylvania Avenue. This incident perfectly illustrates Ulysses S. Grant's character. He had a serious need for speed on horseback. In 1872, Washington, D.C. had strict rules. Carriage speeds could not exceed a horse's walking pace. The chase. Officer William West spotted a carriage flying by at a gallop. He whistled, but the carriage didn't stop. West mounted his horse and gave chase. "You are under arrest, sir," the officer, not recognizing the short, bearded man as the president, said. "Sir, I must arrest you for speeding." Grant's reaction. The president laughed, agreed, and personally rode with the officer to the station, where he paid a $20 bond, roughly $500 today. He even left his horse at the precinct stable. The next morning, newspapers were full of praise. Honest Grant did not abuse his power. Fact 3. The turkey versus the eagle, a culinary war of symbols. Benjamin Franklin was more than a diplomat. He was a keen observer of both human and avian nature. In a 1784 letter to his daughter, he launched a scathing critique of the bald eagle. The eagle as a thief. Franklin wrote that the bald eagle is a bird of bad moral character. He does not get his living honestly. He is generally poor and often very lousy. He noted that eagles often steal prey from hard-working hawks. Why the turkey? Franklin believed the turkey was much more respectable. He called it a true original native of America, and noted that while it looks a bit vain, it is a bird of courage that would not hesitate to attack a British grenadier who dared enter its farmyard. Congress disagreed, and the eagle remained a symbol. Fact 4. The Bear Flag Republic. 25 days of independence and the Russian connection. In June 1846, a group of 30 American settlers, unhappy with Mexican rule, stormed the home of General Mariano Vallejo in Sonoma. Bear and star. They created a flag featuring a grizzly bear and a single red star. The bear symbolized strength, and the star represented the hope of joining the U.S. The republic lasted only as long as it took the U.S. Army to reach California. On July 9, 1846, the Stars and Stripes replaced the bear flag. The Russian context. In 1841, the Russians sold Fort Ross to John Sutter, the man on whose land gold was later found. By the time the Californians revolted, the former Russian colony had already been an American farm for 5 years. Had the Russians stayed another 20 years, the history of the Pacific coast might have looked very different. Fact 5. The War of 1812, when the Canadians burned the White House. The U.S. declared war on Britain, hoping to easily seize Canada. President Madison was convinced Canadians would welcome American liberators with open arms. Invasion failure. American generals proved incompetent. One surrendered Detroit without firing a shot, while Canadian militias, mostly of French and indigenous descent, fought desperately. Retribution. In 1814, after Napoleon was defeated in Europe, Britain sent veterans to America. General Robert Ross landed in the Chesapeake Bay. The President's dinner. The British entered Washington as the government fled. They walked into the President's mansion, found a table set for 40 people, ate Madison's dinner, drank his wine, and then set the building on fire. It was later painted white to hide the burn marks, hence the name White House. Fact 6. The 1790 census. The first president out of bounds. The first U.S. census was the brainchild of Thomas Jefferson, then Secretary of State. The law required a count of all free people, slaves, and heads of households. The Washington problem. In 1790, George Washington was constantly on the move, touring the southern states to unify the nation. The marshals conducting the census simply couldn't find him on the designated day. The irony. By law, the president was supposed to be recorded at his usual residence, Mount Vernon. In the Fairfax County, Virginia records, Washington's name appears, but the columns for age and profession remained blank for longer than usual. At the time, the future District of Columbia was just a swamp where pigs grazed. Fact 7. The Overman steam carriage, steam on the off-road. In the 1860s, 1880s, engineers tried to solve the problem of traversing the prairies without railroads. The most ambitious project was the steam carriage by the Overman Wheel Company. The design, it was a monster on 3-meter-tall wooden wheels, weighing about 7 tons. A 20-horsepower steam engine was mounted in the rear, scaring the horses. During 1885 tests in Nebraska, the machine reached 16 kilometers per hour, but its roar and clouds of steam caused farm horses to bolt for miles. Legislators quickly passed laws banning horseless carriages on public roads. The mud factor. Even the massive wheels sank into the spring mud of the prairies. The project died with the arrival of the bicycle and cheap gasoline. Fact 8. Martin Van Buren, the first president whose first language wasn't English. Martin Van Buren, 8th president, 1837 to 1841, is the only U.S. president for whom English was a second language. Kinderhook, New York. He was born in a Dutch community where even church services were held in Dutch. He only began studying exclusively in English when he started school. The Dutch accent. Van Buren maintained a distinct guttural accent throughout his life. His political opponents mocked his foreign manners, even though his family had been in America for 4 generations. The Kinderhook Fox. His fluency in Dutch allowed him to conduct backroom negotiations with Hudson Valley farmers, earning him his famous political nickname. Fact 9. Buying Cuba and Yucatan. Imperialism before the Spanish-American War. In the 1850s, President Franklin Pierce and his Secretary of War Jefferson Davis, later President of the Confederacy, pushed for the expansion of slave territories. The Ostend Manifesto 1850, for a secret document written by U.S. ambassadors claiming the U.S. should buy Cuba from Spain for $130 million. It stated that if Spain refused and U.S. security was threatened, the nation could justifiably wrest it from Spain by force. The leak. When the document went public, it caused a scandal. Northern states saw it as a slave power conspiracy. Yucatan. Pierce also considered buying the Yucatan Peninsula from Mexico for $10 million to secure Gulf ports. Mexico refused, and the U.S. eventually settled for the Gadsden Purchase, southern Arizona and New Mexico. Fact 10. Thomas Jefferson, the gastronomic revolutionary. Jefferson was not just a president. He was an obsessed technophile and gourmet who fundamentally changed American cuisine. Macaroni. While serving as ambassador to France, Jefferson fell in love with Italian pasta. He eventually imported the first macaroni machine to the U.S. In 1802, he served macaroni and parmesan at a state dinner, a shock to Americans used to only potatoes and porridge. Ice cream. His library at Monticello contains the oldest known ice cream recipe in America. It called for 6 egg yolks, a bottle of cream, vanilla, and a mound of salt for freezing. Vanilla. He also imported the first batch of vanilla beans from France. Prior to this, vanilla was virtually unknown in the American colonies. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like. Write in the comments which country you want to see next, and what facts you're most curious about. See you in the next episode.